somebody who's considering working with you, they just want the top line.
Yes.
Like they just want to know, usually it's, did it save time? Did it eradicate pain in some way? Did it make us money or save us money?
Welcome to episode 132. This episode is going to be particularly interesting and useful for you if you are responsible for marketing your agency's services. Now, agencies are experts in the field of marketing and are always focused on our clients' marketing success. But how often do we seek an external perspective on how we are marketing our own agency's services? So if you're the owner of the agency, that might be you, or if you're working in a larger agency, you might be, for example, the head of marketing responsible for driving the leads and the sales for your agency. My guest, Janet Murray, is a business strategist and a copywriter and an ex-journalist. She worked a lot for The Guardian. So she works with businesses to create strategic copywriting campaigns that not only save the business time, but also generate and convert leads and sales. She's also the founder of an education and training company and creates and sells digital education products for consultants, coaches, freelancers, and small business owners. Janet is the host of the Courageous CEO podcast, and her Courageous CEO strategic business planner is used by thousands of business owners worldwide and includes tried and tested strategies and resources for business growth. So let's go over to my chat with Janet now. Janet, welcome.
I was only laughing because you said I've been around a long time. I have.
We're going to cut that bit out.
That's fine. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great. It's really fab to be here, and fab studio as well.
I'm glad that we're having an opportunity to speak to each other in person, actually. So, Janet, I want to get straight into the good stuff. Tell me more about campaignomics.
So it's fairly in its infancy as we're talking at the moment, but I'm very excited about it because I've basically been doing it for years and helping people with this for years. But you know, when everything comes together and you suddenly know what to call it and you know how to describe it. So very exciting. But basically it's about creating strategic marketing campaigns that are designed to generate leads and sales and also build authority. And I'm currently getting this made into an infographic. So by the time this goes live, it may well be, we may have it to show. But there's 5 key areas at the moment. So there's a whole series of campaigns that are about generating leads, one about generating sales, one about recurring revenue, which a lot of people are interested in because that can be digital products, but there can be easier ways of doing that. Also building authority through thought leadership content. And also, what's the other one that there must be a number 5. Number 5, retention. So that's the other one. Yeah. So it's about actually, rather than thinking about content in terms of individual pieces of content, and maybe we can get into that, it's about building out full-on campaigns because that gets much better results. And maybe we can get into that and I can share some examples of work I've done with clients that really demonstrate that.
That's brilliant and very succinct overview of campaignomics. Tell me, who is the ideal customer for this offer?
So I love working with 2 types of clients. And when I was looking back at the kind of clients that I've built campaigns for, there's 2 sort of types that really get great results. One is consultants. So people who have a specific offer and it's tried and tested. So people like yourself, you've got a great offer, it's tried and tested. They might have a small team supporting them, but often they're so busy delivering and speaking and building their personal brand and being out and about and working with clients that they're sometimes leaving opportunities on the table. So sometimes that's money, sometimes it might be opportunities to speak or to grow their brand through books or podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever. And then the other type is small creative agencies. And I particularly enjoy working with people like that because often they're doing great work. They've got a great offer. They've got a great product. They've got great people around them. They're just lacking time. And when people are short of time, as we all know, the strategy is often the thing that goes out the window, and suddenly you're kicking yourself because you could have generated an extra whatever thousand or even more, or you could have generated more opportunities if you'd only just had the time to have that conversation or to put that piece of content out. So they're the kind of people I really enjoy working with, because they love what they do and there's a real energy about it, and I can get really excited with them about what they do, but also see real results. Because I know with the work that I've done with you, we can maybe get into a couple of examples, but seeing the impact of work where maybe you're getting a 4 or 5 times return on investment from actually just putting a campaign in place for something that's already a great product, it's working really well, just making some tweaks really sometimes. I just love that. I just find it so rewarding.
Well, as you say, we've worked together, so that's why I was quite compelled to get you on the show as well, because I've seen how you work and I've seen the impact of your work. And let's talk a bit about agency owners for a moment, because there's lots of agency owners that listen to this that are working in small to medium-sized firms that perhaps don't have a dedicated marketing manager, a dedicated agency that's helping them with promoting themselves. And I think it's like the cobbler's shoes, isn't it? You never put the same effort into your own business to promote it as you do for your clients. So let's let's talk about that audience for a moment, because what kind of problems do they typically have, and why is this, and maybe they'd recognize some of those key issues when they're looking to promote their own business.
So often what I find is you've got great people who are very busy because they're great at doing what they do and they've built up a great client base, and maybe they get quite a lot of work via referrals, but they may have that feast or famine thing going on because they're so busy doing great work for their clients and just being the best that they can be, that they often neglect their own marketing. And so they just get that feast and famine where things are going great for 3 or 4 months, and then suddenly things look quiet, and then everybody's scurrying about. And when you're scurrying around rather than planning forward or thinking strategically, that's when people tend to throw spaghetti at a wall. So shall we start a podcast? Shall we do a YouTube channel? Shall we see if we can get our head honcho to speak at this event or that event, or get him on this podcast? And it's often quite kind of, like I say, just throwing spaghetti at a wall and doing lots of things, but not actually having much strategy behind it. So it can feel like nothing's working. They're often not measuring what they're doing. And often, this is a really common thing with all businesses and brands, is they're leading with the tactics. So they're thinking about something they would like to do that seems fun, like start a YouTube channel, or they may be looking at a competitor and saying, oh, they've got a podcast, or they've just published a white paper, or something that they think would be fun to do. But they're not really thinking about what's realistic for them. And so they're using the wrong tactic to get the outcome. So a common example is using low touch marketing tactics when you need to get results quickly. So as we all know, and agencies will know this better than anyone, but most people don't buy from you the first time they hear about you or see you on social media or hear you on a podcast or YouTube channel. They need those touch points, and the research shows it used to be 7 or 8, and I think it's like way more than that because we're all so saturated by content. So it's unrealistic to think that you're going to start a podcast or a YouTube channel or start pitching your head honcho to speak at whatever events, podcasts, and you're going to see money in the bank as a result of that within 90 days. They are the kind of tactics that you're looking possibly even 12 months, but certainly no less than 90 days. But if you're seeing a bit of a hole in the agency budget, or you're looking ahead and thinking things look a bit tight for the next quarter, then it's better to go for higher touch strategies, which might be, and often they actually take less time, less effort, might be just looking at where you might be able to generate new business through from existing clients or previous clients. So it might be about putting together a campaign which is about re-engaging clients that you've worked with in the past. It might be about putting some time into doing a campaign to sell a new offer to existing clients. But often there's this kind of, especially in creative agencies as well, because people get really excited about, our competitors have just done this, maybe we could do this, we get really excited about it. And so you're leading with the tactic rather than the goal and the strategy. And the way I often describe it, it's like starting at the wrong end of your funnel. So where you need to start is say, right, what's the goal? We need to generate 150,000 of new business in the next whatever. Then going back and looking at your leads. And again, this is probably something that's really familiar to agency owners, but you've got your hot leads. They typically your existing clients, your previous clients, they're the most likely to buy from you and probably may even buy from a voicemail, from an email, or from a short chat on Zoom. Then you've got your medium, your warm. So they might be people who are on your email list if you've got one. They might be people who follow you on social media or you've met, but typically there's already some kind of relationship there. Then you've got your cold leads. And cold leads typically take at least 90 days to convert, often much, much longer. There's a YouTuber that I follow, Ali Abdul, and he always talks about when people start a YouTube channel that 2 years, don't expect anything at all, but 2 years. And often you get results quicker than that. But so what you've got is then people who are investing a lot more time, because to do a YouTube, I mean, I love podcasts and YouTube and creative projects like that, but you're investing a lot of time and resources and money in something that's not going to deliver income to the business. Or it might not even be income. It might be that there's something else that you want to do. You want to position yourself in the market in a particular way, or you want to position yourself so that you stand out compared to your competitors or whatever. But those things take a lot more time. And when you need quick results, you're going to need a different tactic. So does that kind of make sense in terms of actually just really kind of starting with a really clear goal, then thinking about, right, what have we already got that we can work with? And also asking yourself that key question, how quickly do we need to see results? Or, if we have more time, fine. And then just focusing on the right marketing tactic. And I have got an example for you, but is that sort of making sense so far?
Before you go into the example, because I was going to ask you that next, as I'm listening to this, I'm kind of thinking, it's like you said, one thing is knowing all of this stuff, because look, we're talking to marketing people. We all sort of get it. But another thing is actually doing it for yourself. So I'm almost thinking, what else is it that mentally, is it a little bit of pride to think, well, as a marketing services agency, we know all this. We just don't do it consistently for ourselves. And it's kind of a well-known thing that's in the agency business. And yet it's so powerful. It's almost like, is there some pride involved? And they might choose to talk to you as a bit of a secret therapist that would do it, so we don't have to tell anyone. Do you think that there are some mental barriers to not doing this in a consistent way? Or is it simply, we can't afford currently to have a dedicated marketing person in the business that's marketing us. And therefore we're going to have to do it ourselves. And like you say, we do tactics, we do these sporadic flashes when we've got the energy or the inspiration. But if only we could do it, we could actually get someone in to do a campaign for us, it would drive so much more return on investment.
Yeah, I find there's a few things going on. So sometimes it can be about just lots of creative people who are just being quite chaotic together. True. And maybe you don't have that sort of balance in your team of those sort of calmer, more organised people who kind of keep everybody on track and keep everybody on. So it can sometimes be a mix. But sometimes I think there's a lot of fear there. And I'm always surprised actually by people who are very accomplished at what they do. When you dig down, you get underneath, I'm always surprised how many people are afraid of doing what is to me the easiest thing. And that's reaching out to existing clients or previous clients. There's this idea often, even with really quite experienced people, that they're already paying us for this, so that there's no way that they make assumptions. There's no way that they would want this as well. Well, maybe they won't, but they might recommend you to someone else, or they might go away and have a chat with somebody in their team and come back and say, do you know what, we were just thinking about what you said. But I think the fear of rejection, it always surprises me how even really quite accomplished, experienced people. And I think we were chatting before, the example I gave you, I was a journalist for many years. I worked mainly on The Guardian, and I wrote and edited for them. But I used to go in and, so I was freelance. So right from the word go, I was having to pitch myself to editors. So if I didn't understand that publication, I didn't understand how to get across my idea. I couldn't pay the bills. But what was really interesting, then I started to spend more time in the office as an editor. I used to be a regular cover for the education editor. And so I got to know some of the other journalists better because I was in there more. And then, of course, everything happened with print and, lots of newspapers shedding a lot of staff. And I was getting messages from people saying, editors, people who used to be the person at the other side of the desk saying, how do I pitch myself? How do I get work? Too afraid. So really confident, accomplished professionals who are too afraid to ask and to do things like, so one of the things that I used to do when I was a journalist was I used to, if someone said no to me, I'd say, would you mind sharing with me why it was a no? Mm-hmm. Or I would ring up and say, look, is there any chance that you could just spend 5 minutes letting me know what you are looking for if this isn't what you're looking for? And it's just about being brave enough to have those conversations. But I think there is a lot of fear, and it's much easier to plan a new podcast campaign or a new YouTube campaign, or than to sit down and go, right, let's make a list of our, top 10 recent clients that we think we could help, or just look at your campaigns. And a really simple thing that I've changed in my own business, which has generated new income for a very small investment of time, is just adding in a 30-minute follow-up call. So when I'm wrapping up a campaign with somebody, and I tell them right at the outset, by the way, at the end, I'll offer you a 30-minute call we can have a bit of a debrief, what went well, what might we have done differently, any questions that you've got outstanding about the implementation. And then as part of that conversation, what's coming next, what's coming up in the next 12 months. It can be a sales conversation but those things I always find are much easier. It's much easier to have those difficult conversations when you've thought about what your strategy is going to be. And if you've already, say, for example, introduced the idea of this wrap-up call and you've said that you're going to offer it, when it comes round, and you've set expectations for what's going to be in that conversation. And this is the thing, as a content person, a marketing person, like as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, oh God, I probably should be talking more about creative content. But actually the wins are often in this sort of more functional content. And actually, there's actually quite a lot of creativity in planning a high converting campaign that doesn't actually take that much content. I tested something last week where I was testing a new campaignomics offer just for a one-off strategy session, and I just wanted to test it out. So I tested 2 campaigns. So one of them was a high touch proactive outreach, which was just reaching out to existing previous clients, say, look, I've got this, it's discounted for the next week. I thought it might be able to help you with this. I thought about each person. Would it be a voicemail? Would it be an email? Sometimes it was both. And I drafted out a series of 3 emails, I think it was, or messages. Then I also did 7 to 9 emails. Then I did 7 to 9 social media posts. That's usually my sort of baseline for any sort of campaign. And the proactive outreach, which took me a fraction of the time, both to create the content and actually do the outreach, converted at 35%, 1% for the high touch stuff. Now, obviously with marketing, the fact that I was at the same time as reaching out to people, emailing my list, posting social media posts that were relevant and were talking about this offer, that will have helped. But you can't argue with those stats, and when you start to look at where you're investing your time and where you can get those quick wins, ironically, that's what can free you up if you want to do the more creative stuff and you want to, really think more long term. But how can we stand out as an agency, or how can I stand out as a consultant by having the podcast or the YouTube channel or the newsletter or doing the white paper or the report? If you can shore those, that income that's on the table, that's there if you'd only ask, that's what gives you the freedom to then be able to do the creative stuff.
It's phenomenal. And you're preaching to the converted, obviously, because I help account managers grow their existing business. So there's so many parallels. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're an account manager, these principles still apply. You know, you're dealing with those current clients. Maybe you're coming to the end of a project. And this is precisely what Janet's talking about right now, which is extending the life of that relationship. Tell us about some examples of maybe companies that you've worked with, agency owners that you've worked with, that brings this to life. Some examples for them.
Well, as an example of a client I'm working with at the moment, so I will be sort of quite broad in how I talk about it, but it's a social media agency that has won a grant to create recurring revenue via a digital product. So they've been funded to create basically a membership site. So I've been helping with the funnel basically, and building out a funnel to help launch this thing. That's you know what I mean, don't you? And what was really interesting is a conversation that I had the other day with this client really brought this to life. So this client has no email list at the moment that's relevant to this particular offer, less than 90 days before launch, and because of the terms of the grant funding, it's got to launch within 90 days. So we'd worked together to map out a funnel and looked at what she did have. So we looked at, this is the goal, we need this many members in by this date. This is where we are at the moment. We have there's no point really even trying to get completely cold leads. But you have got people in your network that you can reach out to proactively. And we looked at some of the networks that she had, and we looked at, you know, would it be better for her to try and, instead of doing a kind of a digital, you know, email lead magnet or something like that, or a cheat sheet that she'd get people to download, would it be better for her to actually strategically get some speaking opportunities that got her in front of the right people, even for a low cost product? Because you might think, well, this is a membership, but even so, people, it doesn't really matter what the price is, whether it's £5,000 or £50 a month. People still typically won't buy from people that they don't know from. They won't take a chance on them because that relationship isn't there. So that was one of the conversations that we had. So in the end, we settled on that she would do some of that kind of proactive speaking type engagements. We looked at some of the opportunities that she had within her network. And then we said, well, we do a lead magnet as well. And that's part of what I was creating for her. So a download that would help to get people onto her list. And we had a conversation the other day when she said, oh, I've heard about wait lists. Now, wait lists is a strategy that I use and have used for years because I've also got a strategic business planner. And so wait lists are brilliant because if you can get people to join a wait list before the thing actually goes on sale or the offer goes on sale, you can convert much higher, you know, and having been doing this for quite a few years, you know, I track, you know, the difference. So it can take, you know, it can mean that when we do pre-order sales, you know, you can take it from like 25%, 35%, you know, and you can actually look at the variables. So you could say, for example, if we were to be able to get our last year, our wait list was 1,000 and we got this many sales in the first five days of sales. If we were to increase that to whatever, then potentially that could be 35% or whatever. So you can start to do some variables and set yourself some targets. However, a waitlist page is just a page, right? But in order to do a campaign like that, you need a campaign of content. So you need not just a waitlist page, but you also need a thank you page, and you might need some other pages to send people to. Then you need to put them onto an email list, and then you need to keep them warm until you're ready to sell them. But your new subscribers, you need to then keep that relationship going. You also need to drive traffic to that waitlist page. So you then need to think, well, you're going to need a campaign of social media posts. If you've already got a list, emails as well. You might need to do other things if you don't have an email list at all. You know, if I've got a new cheat sheet or something, I've got an email list of multiple thousands that I can tell about it, and I know at least some people are going to download it. So the perception often is it's just one piece of content, but actually this was potentially doubling this client's workload. Because what she wanted to do was two campaigns. And when I was explaining to her, I said, what we can do is we can take your lead generation campaign for this free cheat sheet, and we can integrate a wait list in that. But if you want to do that, you know, if you really want to make that work for you, that's a whole campaign of content, and that's just doubled your your workload and your time online and all that kind of thing. I can't remember your original question.
No, this is brilliant. You're going through this example, which is exactly, it's a social media agency owner who's asked you to, they've got this grant. And this is so interesting, and this is so much detail. So what I love about what you've said so far is, because of your background, because of your experience, because you've worked with multiple businesses, but also been on the freelance, like you've worked for a big company, you've worked in I think there's a big thing about being an entrepreneur, having that mindset, and also being an employee as well. And I think there's something around that mindset. But you apply a business strategy before you apply the content marketing strategy. That's what's coming through for me. And that's why I think this is so valuable for other business owners to get you in, to actually help them identify where the key issue is and where their goal is, and then come up with the content marketing strategy that suits. So that, I think that's what's coming through. And I think also maybe some people are asking themselves, how do I get a grant to come up with something similar? You don't happen to know how that all happened. Was that a government thing, or
I think
you don't have to go into details?
I think they were involved in some kind of program, but it's really an interesting thing because, and I'll probably be able to share more about this later on when it's launched. But I was chatting to, it's my cousin I was talking to you about before, he's from an advertising background or from an agency background, and I was telling him about this grant, and he was saying to me, it was really, really interesting, because he was saying, so it is possible to secure grants for this type of work, but basically you're project managing. So I imagine as part of this grant funding, I imagine, I have to ask the client actually whether they're taking a project management fee. I imagine they probably are, but you're not getting paid. Like, you're paying other people to do the work to do this, and I have found myself asking myself whether having the funding is a help or a hindrance in a way. It's really interesting. It's like, I mean, I'll be able to tell you more later. Maybe we can, but I found myself wondering whether actually there might be easier ways of doing it, because when you've got grant funding for something like that, obviously you've got to then, they're quite strict about what you can spend it on and the different functions and whatever. So, but it's brought up lots of questions for me. Again, it's about this kind of mindset and how you use your time. And it sounds like free money, but in a way it's not free money, because what you're essentially then doing is you're being a project manager and you're having to source experts in maybe something that you're not an expert in. That's quite tough. Like, I found myself thinking this, like, to actually find people who can deliver what you need when you are at the start of your journey. Like, it's really made me think about, and again, it's one of those kind of strategy things, isn't it? Because one of the things about when you start, I mean, one of the things maybe we can talk about is recurring revenue streams. So people often think, and I've helped agency owners, like I've worked with an agency owner who wanted to take one of their key services that they sell to clients and turn it into a digital product. And I created the course for her. We did 2 Zoom sessions, like two 3-hour Zoom sessions we co-wrote, and then I went off and did it all for her and just delivered it to her, which is like a 10,000 word ebook course. And because I've done it so many times before, I could then say, this is how you turn it into a course, and this is what these are the kind of steps that you kind of need to go through. But actually there are easier ways of generating recurring revenue. A lot of people think, and obviously I've done it for years and years, I'll just turn what we do into a digital product or a membership or whatever. But actually there's a lot to learn, and there's a lots of different moving parts and lots of different campaigns within it. It isn't just about creating the course, then you've got to launch it. And who you're going to launch it to, you've then got to work out how you're going to a campaign of content to build your audience to sell it to, which is the challenge that we had with this client. We were saying before, weren't we, that you can start to get a point where you think, oh my God, everything's a campaign. But actually anything that you want to achieve in your life or business, it's going to require a goal and a series of content. And the more that you can, basically I'm always looking for the shortest route. So if someone comes, I had a client I was working with recently who I have created a course for her as well, actually, which turns her in-person offer into, she's a consultant with a very niche specialism, into an online course. And but she's not ready to sell it yet. But we generated an additional $8,000 for her, which, as a proportion of her income is quite significant, just by having a look at her offer and going back to previous clients with a retainer offer. And so again, for me, it's always thinking about, there's a lot of noise online, and I'm sure that agencies will be just as, they will see this as well, about, turning your in-person offerings into digital products or memberships or subscriptions or whatever, but actually really taking time to think, well, what's our goal? And if it's money particularly, how quickly do we need to see this money? Because actually there might be easier, quicker ways that require less content, less work, less resources, less outsourcing of work. And so that's what I'm always trying to do with any client. I'm always trying to find them the quickest route. So that particular client, I had to have that difficult conversation, which was like, actually, wait lists are fun. I love wait lists and I love doing all the stats and whatever, but actually it's double the work. And your aim is to get this many people in by this date. Let's keep it simple. Often less is more. And I think when you're a busy consultant, you're fully booked, they're the people that I like to work with the most. They've got a great offer, they've got great expertise, and they're in demand. Or you're a busy agency. I've seen it happen so many times. It's so easy to kind of get that kind of bright, shiny thing and see someone else doing something, and suddenly you're doing a white paper or a report or a podcast, and you don't even know how you got there, but you're committed to doing it, and there's resources and money. I don't know if you've seen this in your, and actually there was a quicker, easier and less painful route, which required a different type of content. So
listen, everything you're saying, obviously I've experienced it myself as well, which we're talking about a little bit later, but it comes back to your thoroughness also in how you approach these things. I think you probably get to a stage in your career where you've done it a million times. You can see, like you said, I can see the short route, and it's just having people trust you to just get on with it. Because I also remember that you had a podcast where you've always been podcasting, but I remember I used to listen, and you always provided templates and downloads and checklists, and you start to kind of, I think you educated your audience so well on what actually went into it. The other thing, there's two things I wanted to pick up on. This idea of agencies productizing their knowledge and so that it can provide some extra value for their clients, perhaps some recurring revenue, but looking at exploring that, I think is really brilliant. And the other thing that you talked about that I wanted to pick up on was the speaking aspect, because a lot of agency owners probably are looking at the Stephen Bartletts of the world or the Gary Vaynerchuks, who kind of became known as agency owners, but also as thought leaders through their speaking. And you said when that lady you're working with, who owns a social media agency, was looking to create an audience quickly, speaking was one of the options.
Yeah.
So I'd love you to speak to that a little bit more, because this year, according to everyone I'm speaking to, people are wanting to be out there mixing in person, whereas a lot of the years since 2020, a lot have been virtual. So can you talk about how much work actually goes into speaking, and if, for instance, when would speaking be applicable, and how perhaps you approach that from a campaign perspective?
Well, I think some of it is about your natural skills and abilities and what you enjoy. And the thing with content marketing as well is that if you don't enjoy making it, if you don't get excited about writing a newsletter or coming up with ideas for it, or podcast or YouTube, it will last for however long, and then it will just go. So for some people, if that's their natural skill set, so for agency owners, for example, them being seen at the right events and speaking. However, again, I always want to be much more strategic about it. Yeah. And so something I have helped clients with before is a talk, or maybe at the most a couple of talks. But I found this as somebody who attended a lot of events in the marketing space for a while. Sometimes it can be a bit like you go to an event and you go, oh, here's so and so again giving the same talk. However, if you don't have one or two main talks, that kind of almost suggests that maybe you're not really clear on what your difference is, from as an agency or as a personal brand. Like what's your thing, what do you want to be known for? And again, so if somebody says to me, I want to get myself speaking at the right events, again, we've got a strategy. So first of all, like, what's your goal? So is your goal to generate X amount of leads or clients? Is it about positioning yourself because you want to land a book deal, or often people they just want to speak because they want to speak.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's fine, but actually that's not going to grow your agency or not going to grow your business. And it's going to mean you're out of the agency or out of your business speaking, which is all very nice. I've done it. I've spoken all over the world and had great fun and traveled or whatever. But actually, if you're doing that at the expense of bringing money or, growing your business, it can actually have a negative impact on your business. So it's about being really strategic. So what is it? Be really clear. What is it we want to do? And then it's about going back and looking at leads. It's the same. I should have given you the image to show, but basically it's just like start with the goal and then go, right, let's look at our leads. Let's look at the opportunities that we've got. So actually, sometimes it could be about events that you've spoken at before or event organisers you already know. But the first, in that situation, it's about making a list of like, what are the right events? Because I imagine there's some agency owners or some consultants in this space who are speaking at events that just because they get asked, rather than because the right people are in the room. And also, are you speaking to the same people? Because I got to the point, I was doing a lot of speaking and I felt like I was speaking to the same people all the time. And so it could be with something like campaignonomics, for example, although I particularly enjoy working with consultants and I particularly enjoy working with agencies, actually I could go into any business and help them build strategic marketing campaigns to generate leads and sales and whatever. So there's potential there to actually target new markets and to take the same talk or the same methodology and complete, so these are the questions you ask yourself. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but that's the conversation that needs to happen. Like, are we just showing up? Another thing I've done a lot is pitch for sponsorship, because I've run quite a lot of big events in my industry over the years. And that was really interesting because when you're on the other side of it, when you're pitching for sponsorship and you've got to try and find out what the people who you want to give you money to back your event. And I remember, I don't think it's any secret, but Captivate. And I remember talking to Captivate, they're my podcast hosts, and thinking, and me sort of assuming that their objective was to get more subscriptions. But actually, when I started that process, I started to understand that actually for that particular period of time, it might have changed, that it was more of a priority for them to be at the right events. It was more about building their brand and their positioning. So again, it's just about really clear is that what is it that you actually want? And it may not always be about the bottom line, but the way I always think about it, because then you want to build a talk that sells whatever it is you need to sell or whatever outcome you want. You create a talk that is just optimized for that purpose. So when you give your QR code at the end, which presumably you do, that you're sending people to either, it might be a download, it might be it might even be a sales page, it might be so and you can't do that. You can't create a talk that's optimized for your goal unless you're really clear on what is it I actually want from this. And again, you want to, I'm always looking at what's going to require the least amount of time investment. So having one talk with one download or maybe possibly two, or it could be tweaked a little bit, is going to take less time, but maybe it might be better for you to take that into different markets and look at, are there other markets that you could target? The other thing as well, do you need to actually go to events? That might be another question. Could it be that you do a podcast tour and you very specifically target specific podcasts. Now I'm on the receiving end of someone who is a journalist who used to get people pitching to me, and also I was the pitcher as well. I did write a book actually called Your Press Release is Breaking My Heart.
I forgot to mention that.
This is 3 years ago. You can still buy it on Amazon. But it was about how to pitch to the press or media, which I still do sort of in my voluntary work, and I still can do for clients. But again, if you do that scattergun thing where you're just like, oh, I'm just going to pitch to anyone. And I get podcasts. I got one yesterday and I just thought, you're paying an agency to do this for you.
And I hadn't listened to it.
Said, I really enjoyed your recent episode. Well, if you really enjoyed my recent episode, you would know that this guy was not suitable and the topic was not suitable. But if you've taken, the time to kind of to get really clear on what were the right events, what are the right podcasts, maybe it's a mix of the two. If you've got any data to work with, you might have done if you've done a campaign before. Now, we know that if we do this many podcasts, we're going to get, and you start to learn things. So, for example, when I've done podcast tours in the past, I know that actually often the podcasts with the smaller audiences, more engaged, they often convert much better. And you only know that if you track it, and, if you only think about, well, if I'm going to go on podcast, well, where am I going to send people? And being really clear, ideally, you want to send them, you want to have a dedicated URL or a QR code or something that allows you to measure to see where you're spending your time as well. And all of that, is a little bit more time up front to actually really make some of those decisions and have some of those conversations. But then you can put a process together. You can have someone else. You can have a VA, or you can have someone else in the office who manages the whole pitching process. But you're also not going to make an ass of yourself by pitching to someone that isn't suitable. You may also be able to leverage relationships that you've already got. You might be able to reach out personally. It might be better for you just to send a voicemail or whatever. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. My experience is generally people aren't doing this, not because, but sometimes actually I don't think they know. Sometimes I think they don't know that in order to pull off a really successful campaign, this is the level of work that's required up front. But I don't know, you might have a better right because you're working with.
I think it's both. It's maybe they don't know, but also that they don't have the time, and also maybe it's the fact that they've tried something in the past, but they haven't approached it in a very thorough way, and then they've got that perception that didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. I think in the agency industry, we talk a lot about lead generation as being the holy grail. We've got to find more leads, but actually everything that you've been saying is trying to optimize what maybe has worked in the past, what we're already doing, and leveraging the client relationships that we've already got. So there's a lot of richness there. Talking of lead generation, I was talking to an agency the other day that specialise in the healthcare industry. So they have pharmaceutical clients, biotechs and things like that. And they feel that they are very good at optimizing their existing client relationships, but not so good at lead generation. I think what was helpful about what you said earlier was, you're not always suitable for speaking, or you don't want to do speaking. A lot of people don't want to put themselves out there. Maybe the podcast route doesn't appeal. What other kind of ways can agencies think a little bit more about driving net new business?
I think it's also worth thinking about the kind of content that your ideal clients consume and enjoy. And, there's some types of clients who they don't care if you're on TikTok or Instagram. In fact, they almost look down their nose at it. And you've got to be honest about that. Those types of clients, actually a white paper or report, I think for thought leadership, actually being an agency that does an annual report or survey or thinking, and this is more long term, you're probably not going to see the results of this short term, but thinking about something that positions you in the market as a thought leader, people who are actually future gazing, helping people to kind of plan, to think about what they need to be thinking about sort of going forward. Podcasts can be good because generally audio, it's easy to consume and whatever, but I think some of it is about having some conversations as well with, if you're an agency that's thinks you're really good at getting leveraging new opportunities from existing clients. And your question really is, well, how do we reach more people? Like, so one of the things that I might do as part of that conversation is set up 10 exploratory conversations with my favourite clients to say, look, can we ask you a favour? What we're really looking to do is to meet more people. Like, it is, it may well be from those conversations that actually you might want to do a referral campaign, and you might want to, I mean, again, there might be sort of ethics around this, but with consultants, sometimes actually having a really strategic referral campaign where you pay trusted people an introduction fee or whatever. Sometimes paid for events. I think a lot of something that I've done myself in recent years, but also I've facilitated for clients, is paid for events, where basically I give people access to my audience, and they pay to do a workshop or a day of training or whatever. And there's different ways that you can set it up, but they pay either per lead, and we can obviously use our strategies and our chat marketing software to actually collect leads for them, and it's all GDPR compliant. And for one fee, they pay for lead generation. If they want to invest more, they can make an offer. Now, obviously, this comes with, and I've paid other people to get in front of their audiences. Well, I'd rather pay to get in front of the right people, and people who can give me reliable data, about how many leads, and that can actually give me those email addresses or whatever it is that you want. But I think I think often people are following trends rather than actually looking at what would really resonate. If I want to get more of these types of clients, like, what are they consuming? Like, maybe a newsletter. Like, it could be as simple as an email newsletter. But again, from my journalism background, a lot of people, they write the most dull newsletters. And I remember something my editor used to say to me on The Guardian, but I used to do a column where I think it was kind of like a gossip column about it was about the education sector. And she said, ideally we want things that people save to read with their coffee. And I think if you're going to do a newsletter, just thinking about, well, for our clients, what would be the kind of thing that they would save up for their morning coffee? Like, so it might be educational, it might be about trends or whatever. But again, part of your research for that, rather than just doing a YouTube channel because a competitor is, or you've seen something at a conference that's caught your eye, actually setting up, some exploratory conversations. Say, look, can we just find out a little bit more about, where you get your information from? What sort of things would be really helpful? Like, how could we help you? Which is the same kind of thing I know you've said to me before, that when you do in agencies where you do client breakfasts or you bring in speakers or whatever. I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do for them, but just taking that time just to slow it down and think, what's the shortest route? Like, we don't have to do everything. We don't have to be on every channel. We don't have to do a newsletter, a podcast, a YouTube. Like, we can just pick one thing. And that's another piece of advice I give people is you can't say something hasn't worked if you haven't done it consistently for at least 90 days, like at least with something like a podcast or YouTube, like longer. But, and if you haven't got any data or stats, if you haven't set up any way that you can actually measure, and again, agencies will probably be guilty of telling their clients this, but maybe not doing it themselves.
Absolutely.
So, and I always say to clients, if you want to do a white paper or some kind of downloadable or newsletter, like one thing per quarter, like no more than that, because it's too much, to launch one new thing, because you're not just creating the thing, you have to launch the thing. So does that kind of make sense in terms of?
Totally.
Yeah.
There are so many ideas that, I think someone listening to this is going to be inspired by how many different ideas there actually are, because maybe their thought is, if I need to generate leads, I have to just go to networking events, or I just need to speak. But actually, there are so many different things you can do. And I think you've probably inspired a lot of people to think differently, because you're right, what you said about being a futuristic thinker, particularly now when, marketing services agencies are under attack a little bit, in the fact that we've got this big Gen AI kind of, everyone's talking about Gen AI and how it's going to affect both marketing and agencies that serve them. So where do we position ourselves so that clients still see us as valuable? So is that positioning piece? Have we got the right positioning? Have we got the right proposition? And then it's also what you said about where are our clients actually hanging out? You've got market research on tap because you can ask your clients where they hang out and then align what you do to where they are actually going to be.
Yeah. And another point I would make about the research is another thing a lot of people hide behind is surveys. Like, I personally hate surveys because I just find them a pain. And it may well be that you know, you've got agencies that are brilliant and they specialise in doing surveys and they're really brilliant at them. But actually, the most powerful way often is to really, because then you can dig deeper and ask deeper questions, because people are often concerned about, you know, they might answer a survey in terms of what they think they should be listening to and watching or whatever, rather than actually what they are engaging with. And when you're having a personal conversation with people, I mean, you, and again, you can, is there something in it for clients? Can you do a focus group where you invite them in and they get an opportunity to meet each other if there's some benefit to that, or you bring in a guest speaker or whatever. But I'm always, if I want to ask some people to do a favour for me, I always think about what's in it for them. Maybe we'll give them a free 3-hour consulting or something like that, in exchange for just giving you a bit of their time. But I really think those conversations and just those follow-up questions are really important. I can imagine people hearing this and go, oh, right, we'll do a survey. And I think, no, actually, I think this needs a personal touch. Like, data can be helpful, but if you're starting from like, well, we don't really know where they engage, they might tell you that they're on LinkedIn, but secretly they all are on TikTok, or they're, you know, like, and so being able to have deeper conversations, I think is important.
I think that's the other thing that you're personally very good at, is getting to the truth. And I think, again, it comes back to your sort of, your background is quite multifaceted, but particularly your journalism background allows you to ask the question that perhaps someone else wouldn't ask. And I love what you've said about surveys, because, again, a little bit of a sacred cow in the agency world is using NPS as a measure of how satisfied your clients are. And I had the relationship audits and management, Simon Rintutt and Kerry Evans, in a while ago. NPS was originally designed for B2C rather than B2B. So the depth of understanding you can get from taking the time to conduct those questions in a different way, rather than just a survey that no one actually fills out anyway, is going to also uncover a lot of this rich insight to enable you then to strategically plan where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to investing in promoting yourself. Yeah,
and another sort of campaignonomics thing that I'm really keen on is testimonials or client stories, actually building that into your process. So for an agency or for a bigger piece of work, maybe that follow-up call, the free one, is an hour, and as part of it you say, look, as part of it we're going to ask you some questions. Why do people not give testimonials? Typically because they're busy and it just goes down and down there, and they often don't know what to say. I give my clients templates, or you can do it on a call. You can just ask them some questions and then you can send them over a draft, but also making sure that you're getting testimonials that are actually meaningful. Most agencies, most businesses I look at, you go on their website and their client stories or their testimonials, there's no, I mean, we worked on a campaign for you, didn't it? But there's no headline. You know, there's no kind of like, you know, we made this much more money, or this saved us this much time, or, you know, somebody who's considering working with you, they just want the top line. Yeah. Like, they just want to know, usually it's, did it save us? Did it save time? Did it eradicate pain in some way? Did it make us money or save us money? And we did a piece of work together, I think, where we basically went through, before we started to put together the campaign, and like, well, what are the 3 key things that your clients are looking for? What are the desirable outcomes? Like, it's very difficult to get effective testimonials without really understanding, well, again, it comes back to your health agency, but if you want to get more people like that, your testimonials need to be screaming those things that they're looking for. And again, I think my journalistic background makes me think about the testimonials. It's not just about getting a testimonial, but it's a campaign. So when you work on a newspaper, like the Guardian, and you're doing case studies for an interview, for an article, you obviously have to have a mix of different viewpoints. You have to, if you're saying something about somebody that they might not like, you have to give them right to reply. Even things like just down to the pictures that, I would be very involved in as an editor in the pictures. I remember being absolutely mortified once by, I worked on this supplement that someone had paid for, like some apprenticeship organisation, and realising it was all about apprenticeships, and the photos, I woke up in the middle of the night panicking because they were all either white, they were white males, and it was just one of those things where I think whatever the stories were, whatever we had access to, there were women in that, there were ethnic minority people in there, it was diverse, but for whatever reason I woke up panicking because, and again, when I think about testimonials, when I work with people, because the other campaigns I've worked on with people is event ticket sales and things like that, when people go on your sales page, they need to see themselves in the room. So if you are using photos, just making sure they're diverse. We had this conversation on making sure that it doesn't look like you just only work with this type of, or the types of companies that you choose. There's actually quite a lot that goes into it, a really effective testimonial. And once you've got a testimonial campaign, you can use it in so many different ways. You can use it in your email marketing, you can use it for social media posts, you've got a load of content, you can use it in brochures, you can use it on your website. It's like multi-purpose. But often I find most people, it's not part of their process to get a testimonial, and they haven't really thought, if you email 5 months down the line, they've forgotten, ideally you want to get them while they're excited, and they're really pleased because you've had that follow-up call, you've agreed that they've had a great outcome, you've got an idea of their future plans, and you say, but while we're on, is it okay if I'll just take you through a series of questions? But this all requires some planning, like the campaign, even how you conduct a follow-up call. It's a bit like a sales call, like making sure, I have a checklist for sales calls, but, of making sure that you make people feel comfortable at the start. Again, this might be the journalism background, but, there used to be certain things that I used to say at the beginning to try and make people feel comfortable, because I know some people don't like talking to journalists, even just stuff like, are you aware which publication you're talking to? Because sometimes if they've done a lot, they wouldn't be, and where this is going to go, and have you got any questions for me? But even just mapping out what's that wrap-up call going to look like, and setting up expectations for clients, because if they don't know you're going to ask them for a testimonial before the call, that might wrong foot them a bit. But if you've, just thinking all of that through, and just, again, it's just about making it all easier, reducing the friction. And I think that's very similar to sales, isn't it? It's like, where can you reduce the drop-off points or the friction? And I think people focus on creative marketing campaigns and don't realise that the money is often in removing the friction from what just seemed like onboarding, functional content, if you see what I mean.
And repeatability. Everything that you approach so thoroughly with a process, like you said, with the steps. And actually that means it's going to be easier the next time you do it, because then it's just rinse and repeat. And going back to the testimonials, obviously what I do is to help agency account managers grow existing business, so they achieve lots of ROI. I mean, I've got some fantastic testimonials, and when I started working with you, what I realized was the testimonials, I was getting testimonials, but I wasn't structuring them. They were too long, and what you were then able to do was to kind of look across all the different diverse people that I've had as giving me testimonials and pick out those sound bites, but also in a way that also highlighted all the different ways that I can offer my services. So looking at it through a very strategic lens as well.
They can also be really useful if you're dealing with objections as well. So when somebody says, well, I'm not sure because, I don't know, we're concerned that we invested in this and, we didn't get the outcome that we were hoping for. We say, oh, yes, well, we work with Frida and I remember them sharing the same thing. But actually, I can send you over the, or you can put it in your follow-up email or whatever. You can send them with your proposals. They're so multi-purpose. But I think, and once you get into the habit of doing it as part of your process, I say that, like I've got a bit of a backlog with my own at the moment, and I understand how easy it is to get. But once you've got the campaign in place, you're just tweaking, improving. Even things like call reminders. It sounds like such a small thing, but scope creep. If you've got that, could you just with clients, then if you're not sending them call reminders and follow-ups, or if they're not getting you stuff, creative assets that you need to work on something. And it isn't just about making your life easier. Like, we do like a 48-hour reminder and we do a 24-hour reminder. I do a follow-up where I deliver the recording of any call plus a transcript and usually keys or recommendations. But also for me, it's not just about making your life easier and avoiding scope creep, because if they can't say, well, you didn't remind me, or I didn't know, or they cancel on the last minute. But also it's about building that trust and that consistency that you will do what you said you will do when you said you will do it. And again, it's quite subconscious, but it's there, isn't it? And in terms of repeat business, so Jenny, after every single call, we always got a follow-up email with a recording, a summary of what we talked about, plus 3 next steps. We always got a reminder if we needed to get some assets by a certain date. We always got a reminder. There's so much that you can do, but again, often it's not that creative content. It's looking at those sort of less creative pieces of content. There can often be so many gems in there that can really help.
This is account management 101. Every account manager that's listening to this is absolutely with you on that. And another thing that you just said was, even myself in my own business, I've got a backlog of testimonials that I need to kind of process. So we're going back full circle to actually the benefits of a small to medium sized agency that doesn't have the time or the resources or the bandwidth to kind of do this stuff well. And I think what you've highlighted really nicely is the breadth of different strategies that you can employ to promote your business. And more so than ever, I think agencies need to double down on what's worked and also leverage someone externally to help them accelerate that, because it's not that they can't do it, it's just that they don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it. And
it's prioritizing as well. So we've talked about so many different things, but if someone came to me and said, like, what would you advise that I do first? In almost all cases, I've talked about creating a series of campaigns for repeat business, so for recurring revenue. I've talked about lead generation, sales. I've talked about authority. The very first place I'd always say to start would be to look at retention and repeat business, because you've probably got some of those campaigns, even if they're not full, you've probably got some of them. Just optimizing those and making sure you're not leaving money on the table with existing and previous clients. And even people who say they're really good at it. I mean, I was doing something for some clients yesterday and I was like, I was seeing little gaps and places that I could just update my campaigns just to optimize and potentially not leave money on the table. That would be the first place that I would start, because when you're in that kind, and I think a lot of agencies can end up like this, especially you've got a lot of bills, you've got a lot of overheads. If you're in that feast and famine where some quarters are good and other quarters you're like, are we going to make payroll this month, or things are feeling a little bit tight, or what's coming, or maybe something gets cancelled, you get hit by something unexpected. If you've already shored that down and you've got really good campaigns in place, solid campaigns, and things like, I would put testimonials in there as well, so that you've got great client stories and you've got a process for collecting them and they're really good. Then you can start to go, okay, well, next quarter maybe we might look at lead generation, and we might look at creating a very specific resource or updating it. We might look at what's going to be our best lead generation strategy for the quarter. Then you might look at authority the next quarter. So I would always be about, and that's what I would do with a client. A client came to me and said, I just feel like we're all over the place. We're feast and famine. Some quarters are good, some quarters are a bit iffy, and we just had a big contract that we expected to be to be renewed, and it hasn't gone through, and now we're panicking a bit. I would always say, right, let's prioritize. Like, you can't do all of this at once. Let's look at the different campaign areas, and likely, unless it's already shored down, it will be the repeat business and the
lapsed clients and
so basically retention and upsell, and then work out. And when you calm it down, a lot of people jump to the authority stuff, especially creative agencies, because it's fun, like coming up with ideas for new stuff is fun. But having just discipline sometimes to go, no, I'm just going to, just shore this stuff down, and that can give you that freedom.
It's so true. And I suppose it varies on the size of the business. So the bigger agencies have the account managers in place and the senior account managers who are responsible for this retention and growth piece. And then agency owners that have smaller agencies where they're very much still involved in not only the lead generation, but also the extension of the life of the existing clients. This is where, they probably need sort of, I think both need strategic counsel and kind of help.
I think the first stop and the first thing I would always want to do with any client is to do an audit of where you are.
Yeah.
So before you start to, if someone comes to me, for example, and they want me to create an online course or to help them with a launch for a digital product, I'd always be like, okay, where does this fit in with everything else that you're doing? And making sure that it's actually the right thing for them to do. And if they are creating a digital product, for example, is it aligned with your other offers? Because it would be much easier to sell. Because I know I created a course with you. Something that you've been able to do is so if people don't have the budget for the accelerator, you've been able to offer them the self-study version. I think you were saying earlier that somebody said, oh, actually, I've done the self-study. I think maybe I'd like to join the live version. But also potentially you can sell licenses, but if what a lot of people do is they come up with an idea for digital product and it's like a handbrake turn, it's not aligned with so the very first thing is let's just take a step back. Let's look at where this, because often people come to me and they want me to create a campaign for them. But it's like, well, where does this campaign fit into everything else? Is this going to optimize, or is it actually going to take you away and cause you problems elsewhere in your business? They're really key questions to ask. And the other point I meant to make earlier about why campaigns are so important. I had this question, my clients have been asking me this a lot, like, well, why are you going on about campaigns? Like, and I think it's because whatever you're doing, a frequent inquiry I get is somebody will come to me and say, I've got this thing that I'm selling. Can you look at my sales page and can you give me some feedback on my sales page, or could you rewrite my sales page, whatever? And I say no to those clients. And it's because I need to see the whole campaign. So you could have the best sales page in the world with all the buttons in the right place and the calls to action and colors, and it's all optimized and heat mapped and everything. But actually, if there's a problem in your funnel, like you're not actually, the way you're getting people into the funnel to look at that sales page isn't right, or your email marketing copy isn't right. I need to see every piece of content in that funnel, because a sales page alone won't get you the sales that you need, if that kind of makes sense. And your business is not going to grow on one piece of content, two pieces of content. You could post consistently, or you could email consistently for a year and get nothing, because it's about you publishing the right content at the right time. And so if someone comes to me and said, can you do this campaign for me? Like, I was like, well, let's just find out where this fits in with everything else. Is this the right campaign? So the first thing I'd always want to do is to do an audit of and look at where this all fits into what else they're doing, because again, you want to find the shortest route, the easiest route, the least amount of work, content. That's what I'm always looking to do.
I think also exactly what you've just said. I think a lot of agency owners perhaps are thinking that they need to be consistent on LinkedIn. They just need to keep posting on LinkedIn, and but actually, are their clients hanging out on LinkedIn? Are they sort of doubling their efforts in one place, where actually they need someone like you to come in and say, actually, let's think about your strategy in a more sort of holistic view, because there might be several things that they've tried in the past, but maybe they haven't approached them in a very thorough way and have decided that they don't work. Like, for example, you and I worked on a webinar together, and the way I was planning on approaching the webinar was different to your approach, which made so much more sense because you've done it a million times. But it's things like that. And sometimes I talk to clients that say to me, we've tried webinars, that they don't work, but actually, did they approach it in a systematic way, like you're alluding to? Show me the whole funnel. Don't just show me one piece
and I remember with your webinar, the actual content of the webinar I knew was going to be brilliant, but I think you were wanting to do maybe some free sessions beforehand.
Yeah.
And I was saying, well, actually, then what you do, you're creating more work for yourself because you're giving, and then you free sessions. But actually, so it's 3 times the amount of work and content and whatever. Like, what if we looked at how we can just do, but also you're asking them to come to a free session and then inviting them to another session.
Yes.
Like, is there something else that you can give them in between? And again, these are all like questions that it's not like there's a right answer, but it's about, for some people, maybe that is the right thing in some circumstances, but it's just thinking it through. And when you take the time to think it through, often what people are doing actually with funnels is they're adding more steps in. And you know what it's like when it's really frustrating. And again, creative agencies, when you're trying to buy something online and it's like you're taking you through more pages or windows than you want to, or, you feel like you should just be able to, often the people who want to buy from you, they just want to buy from you. And a common thing I have with clients is they're like, oh, I want to launch this new thing. So I'm going to create this freebie, or I'm going to do a free webinar and a free class. And then and this is often for their existing clients. It's like, why don't you just ask them if they're interested? Like, why are you making them? Because actually you're making more work for them. You're making them come to a webinar. You're making them download a free thing. You're making them read these emails, or trying to make them read these emails. Well, actually, if they've got this problem and you can solve it, they'd probably just prefer you just asked and just said, hey, look, I'm doing this. This is how much it costs. and it's that often I think we think that we need to build these like complex marketing funnels. And a friend of mine who's a specialist in sales, I remember she used to always say, like, if you've ever sold anything to anyone, you have a funnel. So, if I ask you, if I send you a link to something and say, hey, Jenny, I'm doing these sessions, like, and you say, yes, that's a funnel. Isn't it? Like, that's a funnel. I don't need to get you to sign up for a free webinar or to get my white paper or whatever. And also one of the problems I had in my business, which is why I've really simplified it in recent years, is I ended up with so many funnels, and funnels have to be maintained. So if you've got too many routes in, that how people can work with you, that's another thing. They have to be maintained. So you have to maintain the pages and the tech and the delivery and the automation. And if something goes wrong, and again, it can be easy to get carried away, when everyone was all like click funnels and whatever. Like, I'm a big fan of you, especially when you're testing things out, is like low tech or no tech. So don't invest in, expensive software. Like, when this client was saying to me about a wait list, I was saying, well, you don't need a web page to have a wait list. You can literally just reach out to people and say, I'm doing this on this date. Can I add your email to the list? And as long as you're GDPR compliant and you're, being upfront about how you're going to use that data and store it and all that kind of stuff, you can just put it on a spreadsheet, but you're actually creating this elaborate thing when actually you could just reach out to people and say, is it okay if I reach out to you when it's time? Is it okay if I put your name on this list? And that's,
Well, again, you've hit on another thing about efficiencies in agencies. Right now, we're looking at, AI is taking over. And in fact, I want to ask you about that in a moment. But AI is essentially at the moment helping a lot of agencies be more efficient with their time and shortcut things. But you've got to kind of audit where you're at currently anyway with your existing systems in order to choose the right tool and apply it in the right way to shortcut the process. So I think, again, it's coming back to this strategic overview of where they are as a business, how big they are, what's working, what's not working, and have they explored other avenues and thought enough about their target audience and their positioning. There's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah. And the other thing is that the strategy part is the important bit. The tech is second.
Yeah.
So the tech is the bit that allows you to implement the strategy. An example I often think about this, I used to run these annual content marketing conferences, and I remember I got up and I did a 20-minute talk where I debriefed my strategic planner launch, and I showed everyone all behind the scenes of my wait list and like how many people, how many emails I sent, how many social media posts over a certain period, and what the numbers were and whatever. And we'd used a chat marketing, so we'd used ManyChat as part of it. And afterwards, I remember feeling so frustrated because everybody was going up to my ManyChat person and wanting to book in with her, and she was having to turn most people away. because of her capacity, but because it was my strategy. What her expertise was in me saying, I want to do this. Tell me what ManyChat can do to make this happen and to make this easier and to make it, our conversions are much better with ManyChat than they were via email because of all the delivery issues and whatever. And it was really frustrating for me. And she was saying to me, most of the people, I'm having to turn them away because in order to use something like chat marketing, you need a list, for example, or even Facebook advertising is another thing. And I'm sure agency owners will be, but one of the key things that you might use in advertising is, you upload your email list so that you've got an audience that it can, that it can mimic, if you like, to reach out to. But if you're trying to, I think there's a tendency to focus on the tech and like you just sign up for whatever it is. I've had to sort of diplomatically say to some clients, you've been paying for ClickFunnels for 3 years or whatever, and you haven't used it. You haven't actually to launch a digital product. You don't actually need anything. You don't need any paid for. You can do it all free. And actually, it's better to do it free first of all, because then you can test the market and see if people actually want it, and then if it's selling, you can start to think about being more. But I think that's the other thing as well, is that people sign up for all sorts of tech without actually, the strategy, thinking like, what is it we actually want to, do we need that? Actually, maybe we don't need that really, expensive lead scoring thing that we've been sold. We could actually do it on a spreadsheet or whatever, or use AI to help us just do better calculations or whatever. And I think that can be a danger as well.
I agree. I think it would be remiss of us not to mention our mutual friend Osman Sharif, who's always saying there are seasons in your business journey.
Yeah.
And I remember I was that soldier that paid for ClickFunnels when I certainly didn't need it. This was like 12, 13 years ago. So you're right. There's the tech is not the solution. It's the strategy. And then how can we make it more efficient?
And then it's working out what are the best tools. And often there are free, especially when you're testing something out, there's free tools. Versions. You can do it absolutely free or very, very low cost. But people will get very in the weeds about the tech solution. And AI as well, as you know, I'm a more recent convert, but because my brain works like it just lists things and but I think it's, if you know what you want it to do. So as somebody who has loads of like pre-designed campaigns and like, brilliant, I can give AI my campaigns that are already have a very specific goal and are already working well, and say, hey, what would you do to this to improve it? What suggestions have you got? If you're starting from scratch and you don't know what you want it to do, or you're asking it to do the wrong thing because you don't really understand, like for example, the chat marketing thing. So I could imagine some clients of mine going and saying, give me a ManyChat strategy. AI is probably not going to flag up to you that, well, if you have no email list or you've got no audience, or park that till later. And I think, you'll know more about how agencies are using it. But
well, it's judging the outputs as well. I think this came up on a recent podcast as well, where we were talking about specifically the outputs of Gen AI. And also, you must be seeing LinkedIn being flooded with social media posts and comments that have been clearly generated by AI. It's as bad as it's ever going to be now. It's only going to get better. However, to your point about, it can output something, but if you don't look at it through the lens of someone experienced, how do you know if that's actually good or not? Or, because we've all experienced bad, poor copy.
Yeah, and also plagiarised stuff as well. Like I've been chatting to ChatGPT a lot about my campaignomics as I'm sort of building out this new offer, and there's certain words or phrases that I'm thinking, that keeps coming up. I think that possibly could belong to somebody else, and I need to be really careful. But having that critical, I think that phrase that you keep, it sounds great, but I've just got a feeling that you've probably taken that from somewhere, else, and I don't want to get served with a defamation,
cease and
desist, or defamation, a totally different thing. But I don't want somebody kind of trying to sue me because I've nicked their like catchphrase or whatever. And I just think you've just got to be really And I think if you know what you want it to do, I had clients saying to me, I'm not a good writer, so I'm going to get ChatGPT to write me a book. But again, if you don't know, or create me a course, but if you don't know, like having done it like loads and loads of times for people, I know when I help people create a course, often it's about what doesn't need to go in. And people think they have to create this massive, big kind of multi-module, whatever. A course can be a webinar. A course can be like 60 minutes of audio content. A course can be an ebook. Like, you don't need to create a lot of the time. I think people think they need to create to justify people paying for it. It has to be a certain format or certain, it doesn't. But if you're just going to ChatGPT and saying, write me a book, or, and you don't understand how to structure it and what to put in and what to leave out, I think that's where that's where the problems can come.
I think I can speak to that because you've helped me so much. I always probably overfill content. My emails are too long, but you've really, really helped me. Janet, I'm conscious of your time. I think we could talk all day, and hopefully we're going to go for lunch and carry on our chat. But for those listening, what's the best way of reaching you, of working with you? Because I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people listening to everything that you're capable of helping them with. Who would you like to hear from, and what's the best way to reach you?
So my favourite type of clients are consultants with small teams who've got an established offer that is selling, but maybe they just like to sell more of it or more consistently. They're leaving money on the table, or sort of small to medium agencies. And if you are struggling to generate consistent leads and sales, if you're in feast and famine, probably because you're just so overwhelmed, you've got so much to do and you just need some structure and process in place, or you've got an idea for something you want to launch to build authority, like a podcast or YouTube or whatever, they're the kind of people I love to hear from. What I always like to start with is just doing initially a one-off diagnostics session where we can get on a call and I can look at what's going on in your business, what it is you want to achieve. And then if you need me to build out campaigns for you, then we can talk about that. But initially, the first piece of work I just want to do is like, what's going on? And I'm really big on giving people tangible outcomes as well. So if someone does even a one-off call with me, I will write you some copy. I will give you a campaign plan. I really like it if clients, they have one session and if they can go off and implement, great, and I will give you key pieces of content to do that. But also if you want to start to build out campaigns and start to look in different areas of the business, I can do that as well. But best thing is probably to email me. So it's janet@janetmurray.co.uk, which I presume you put in there. I've got various new things coming, including a new podcast, and I don't know when this is going to go out, but some stuff might be live. But my website is janetmurray.co.uk, and I hope that all kind of made sense in terms of who I can help. I know it says we've covered a lot, but basically, if you need to generate leads or sales, if you want more consistent, you've already got an offer that is selling, but you want more consistency, or you want to build that authority piece, then I can help. And in the first instance, I normally like to do a one-off session to start off with, to diagnose, and then we can take it from there.
Brilliant, Janet. We'll put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much. And I just would want to say personally, thank you for helping me with my business. I'm the perfect testimonial, and I know that I've given you a testimonial, but it has been game-changing working with you, and that's why I was so excited about getting you on the show. So hopefully lots of people will take you up on that offer. Yeah. And thanks again for coming on and sharing all your wisdom.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Janet and have come away with lots of ideas for how to approach your agency's marketing campaigns. And do take her up on the offer of an assessment. Agencies are, as I said, the marketing experts, but sometimes your own promotion of your own business and services sometimes benefit from an external perspective. And finally, if you are responsible for managing, retaining and growing your existing client relationships, then head over to my website, accountmanagementskills.com, where you can sign up for my regular newsletter, in which I share account management strategies, AI tips, and also news about upcoming guests on my podcast episodes. And I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode.